Hi and welcome to something of a deck tech video or a statistics video about Timna, kraum and the cards they play inside the deck, the cards they've chosen to play. What I directly mean by that is here we have Eminence top 16, and if you click here, kraum and Timna, we have a lot of different decks with different win rate here. And we even have deck lists, links to Moxfield deck lists. This means that we can pull statistics, we can pull the percentage of cards they play and see how... yeah, let me show you what I mean. Adnos, 100% inclusion rate. Looked at 66 decks that I pulled basically, and everyone is playing it. It's an auto-include. Undual Breach, same thing, that's a no-brainer as well. Dockside, 100% inclusion rate, same thing, an auto-include. But then we hit something like Imperial Seal and we see this, inclusion rate 74%. Now we should point out that this could be a budget reason. Some of the decks have been playing in tournaments that don't allow proxies, depending on most of them actually allow proxies, so it could be a choice of budget reason. Still though, people aren't always auto-including this one. Draenei Magistrate, also not an always auto-include, even though a lot of people are actually playing it. Toxic Deluge, a 50-50% inclusion rate. So what we are seeing here are cards that are considered good or bad by the community. But we can do something a tiny bit better. We can compare them against each other in win rate as well. As you can see literally next to me, we have the win rate here as well, and if we scroll down, we have a bunch of decks with a lower win rate. We're getting to 0s and 14s and 16s here as well. So let's look at a 40% win rate difference. So we have 31 decks with a win rate of 40% or higher, and 41 decks with a 39% win rate or lower. And the inclusion rate of Imperial Seal between these two groups are basically the same, so Imperial Seal doesn't seem to have an impact in your win rate. But take a look at this, here we have an inclusion rate among all the 66 decks of Gilded Drake that is very low, like 7.6% play this. But if we look at the inclusion rate among the win rate when we differ them, we can see that the decks with a 40% win rate, none of them are playing Gilded Drake, which is an indicator that maybe you should start cutting Gilded Drake from your deck. Peer into the Abyss has a almost 20% inclusion rate among all the decks, but it's played a little bit more among the decks with a higher win rate, as you can see here. Even though still the decks with a lower win rate are also playing it. It's just that the ones with a higher win rate are including it a little bit more. Orcish Bowmaster, I actually agree with this result. It has a 41% inclusion rate among all the decks. I've talked about Orcish Bowmaster before. I think it's a great card, but it's not an auto-include. It's not a card that you tutor for, it's just an overall decent card. And when you compare the higher win rate with a lower win rate, it seems to have the same percentage inclusion rate, or 3% stage difference, but it's basically the same. The takeaway from this is that it's definitely a card you can play, but it's something you play because of player preference, play group meta, or another big reason for it. That Toxic Deluge had a 50% inclusion rate, but it sees play a little bit more in the decks with a higher win rate, while a card like Damn has a much lower win rate to 24. So it looks like Toxic Deluge is the better card compared to Damn. While Cyclonic Rift has an almost 100% inclusion rate, this seems to be the go-to board wipe, so to say. Necropotence doesn't seem to have well, someone is playing it, but not much. In other words, it doesn't seem to make the cut for the Timna kraum decks. A little bit surprised about that actually. Jeweled Lotus is in almost every single deck. Simian Spirit Guide, pretty much the same. I'm guessing this is a budget region potential. It's a bit expensive, so that could be the reason why some people aren't playing it, but also player preference. It seems to be a great card and somewhat of an auto include here. Swan Song has a 100% inclusion rate, while an offer you can't refuse is a 50-50 cut. Grim Hireling has a 15% inclusion rate, so not that many decks are actually playing this. And if you look at the percentage difference between higher win rate and lower win rate, it doesn't seem to matter. Grim Hireling is equally included in both groups. Ledger Shredder seems to be a little bit more popular. The Grim Hireling had a 15% inclusion rate, while Ledger Shredder has a 26% inclusion rate. And if we're looking at the difference between the higher percent win rate and the lower group, we can see that the lower group are including Ledger Shredder more, while the higher percent win rate aren't playing as much Ledger Shredder. So the takeaway here is that Ledger Shredder might be a card you should cut. Statistics isn't something you can set in stone, so I don't want to say that what I'm saying right now, like Ledger Shredder is bad, isn't really correct. I'm just showing you the statistics and making some philosophical ideas from it. Fairy Mastermind seems to be the go-to creature value engine. Now you're like including a bunch of various cards, so you have a bunch of slots that you're choosing from. So when you're choosing between Ledger Shredder, Grim Hireling or Fairy Mastermind, most people seem to choose Fairy Mastermind. And this one has a inclusion rate that is very even among both the high win rate group and the low win rate group. So Fairy Mastermind doesn't seem to impact your win rate, it seems to be doing good compared to Ledger Shredder that appeared in the lower win rate group. A similar thing can be found in Dragon Ray's Channeler. This actually surprised me. I didn't think that many people were gonna include it. I actually like it. I think it's a great card inside the Breach decks, and this was a 100% inclusion, auto-include for Undual Breach deck, so yeah. But if we look here at the higher win rate and the lower win rate, we can clearly see that the people with a higher win rate are including Dragon Ray's Channeler a little bit more. It's not a huge difference, but it seems to be doing good. This result actually surprised me. So this is a value engine and we're kind of looking at value cards at the moment. The One Ring has a very low inclusion rate. I can speculate and see that yes, this is a budget reason, it's quite expensive and hard to get to. Second, it has a 4 CMC and this is an ad nauseum deck. We noticed ad nauseum is played in every single 66 decks here. So that could be another reason. However, if we look at the inclusion rate among the high win rate and low win rate, it doesn't seem to have an impact on your actual win rate in the game, as it's basically quite even. So it's like a card that very few people are playing and it doesn't seem to be that terrible. This is another card that is a surprise to me, Gitaxian Probe. Now I personally really like Gitaxian Probe. I like to thin out my deck, and this is also, once again mentioned, an Undual Breach deck. Gitaxian Probe digs through your library and fuels your graveyard very little, but you don't pay mana for it. So personally, I love the card, but apparently it has a very low inclusion rate. And it seems to be the correct choice, like I might be wrong. You see, you're often including cards based on feelings, and I just gave you my feelings about Gitaxian Probe. I like it, so I basically auto-include it in every single deck with the color identity of blue I currently have. But looking at statistics right here, the people with a lower win rate percentage have included it more, and the decks with a higher win rate have a lower inclusion rate on the Gitaxian Probe, so it might be a card I should start considering cutting from my deck. Esper Sentinel, everyone is playing this. Wandering Archaic, no one is playing this. Ranger Captain, almost everyone is playing this. Grand Abolisher, almost everyone is playing this. City of Traitors, it's a pretty even, not that many are actually playing it, but it's a very spread out, so it doesn't seem to have an impact in your win or loss by including City of Traitors. So it's a player preference. It will work equally good having it in the deck as equally good not having it inside your deck, apparently. Daffy Voidwalker, a 34 or 35% inclusion rate. And it's a little bit more Daffy Voidwalkers in the lower win rate group. However, they are very close, so I'm gonna say that Daffy Voidwalker, I don't think it's gonna impact your win rate that much, actually. Opposition Agent has a much higher inclusion rate, almost everyone is playing it. But I do find this interesting. Every one of the 31 decks that have a win rate with 40% or higher, all of them were including Opposition Agent, while every deck, or well, sorry, not every deck, but 12% of the decks with a lower win rate of 40% don't include this. So it seems to be a card that is actually performing and should be recommended. So among the three musketeers, Opposition Agent seems to be the winner. Daffy Voidwalker seems to be a second place, and Orcish Bowmaster seems to be in the third place among these three. And I will actually agree with that. That was a short statistics breakthrough for Timna, kraum, the cards people include from tournament participating decks. A big shout out to Eminence and their development team. Without them, this entire video would not be possible because I pulled statistics from their website. I hope this helps you choosing cards for your Timna kraum deck and gives you some insight to good cards to think about and maybe cards to consider cutting, but also starting to view cards a little bit different compared to your personal preference. Just like how I'm saying that I really like Attacks and Probe, I'm out including it, but according to some statistics, maybe it's something to cut. However, I want to point out once again that this is a very limited statistics sample, so everything is said in this video, nothing can be really said in stone, but it should be giving you a tiny picture of the real truth. Regardless, thanks for watching, take care guys, and I'll see you in the next one.